Alright, so here we are again at the historic Whiting Hotel balcony. We got our good friends Rooster Cockburn, aka Clarence Benish, professor from Pawnee College over in Pawnee, Oklahoma, and our local legend here, Doc Scholl, aka Ned Pepper. And guys, we're gonna have a nice little evening here with this rambling with Rooster and Pepper here on the historic Whiting balcony. We really appreciate y'all coming out here and kind of support this thing. We're just doing our own little open mic night. We had some kids come in here and do some great work, so we're going to keep working on that stuff. But folks, I'm going to give it up here to Rooster and Pepper.
Well, thank you, Scott. Yeah, you heard this is the historic Whiting Hotel. You ought to come down and ramble with us some night. I understand he's got some plans for a street dance coming up. Did you hear about that,
No,
Doc?
I haven't. No, when we're going to do this?
Well, probably sooner than we realize. Yeah.
I'm looking forward to that thing.
I am too.
That's one thing an outlaw likes to do is kick up them hills every now and then. You got to get out and kick it up and mix with the people. Just hide and mix with it. Nobody knows who you are.
Well, you know, I was telling Doc here, Doc Scholl, a.k.a. Ned Pepper, I've been doing a little reading about John Stink, Osage Indian, also known as the Osage Zombie. And it's a pretty interesting story. I've got a picture of him here, but I understand, Doc, you know the whole story. Why don't you tell us?
Well, I know quite a bit about the John Stink story. I mean, he's a legend here in town. Frank Phillips made a lot of people rich in this town, and he wasn't no exception, Mr. Stink wasn't. He'd be around town. He liked to drink. Everybody knew that. And but one time they find him so, I guess you might say, drunk, that they thought he might have been dead, and they buried him. And well, he wasn't drunk. He wasn't dead. He might have been dead drunk, but he wasn't dead. But he made his way back to town, and he's had these dogs follow him all over, and they were like, well, there's John back in town. How'd he get back? It's like a ghost story. But old John Stink, he never gave up. He always had the money. Here's a little story about how the money treated him. Now imagine you getting a brand new 1928 Cadillac or whatever year car he was driving around. Next thing you know, it quits on you. Well, you park it and you buy another one.
Well, it runs out of gas.
Well, they run out of gas. He bought 5 Cadillacs before he figured out you could fill them things back up with gas. And his cabin was up on top of the hill up here in Pawhuska. He bought a cabin to live in, but he put his cows, his chickens, his horses, his goats went in the cabin. He lived in a teepee in the front yard. He wasn't changing his ways for nobody, and he was to the point. John Stink was the real character. He was really here, and there's a little bit more about him that Rooster might be able to clue you in on a little bit about old John Stink.
Well, yeah, it's just straight from this book entitled Weird Oklahoma by Wesley Treat. Shout out to him. I'm just going to read you a couple of things from this book, or refer to him. He did have a rare disease that made him look like he was passed out drunk. And yeah, they talked about it in here. It's some kind of tuberculosis he might have had that affected his an organ somehow in his neck. Anyway, the thyroid or something. I'm trying to find it here. But anyway, so he'd go into these almost coma states sometimes, and it might have been accidentally or induced to by a little alcohol. I don't know. But here it says that when they couldn't revive him when they found him, they went ahead and did an Osage funeral like Doc was talking about there. Now, this was traditional day. He was born here in, they think, 18, where was that say there? Anyway,
1890.
1890. And he lived till the 30s, so he was a good 40 years old or so. But
Yep.
When they buried him, they bury him sitting down in a chair or sitting on a rock, and they pile rocks around him. And that's Osage burial technique.
That's traditional.
And everybody went home after the funeral. But that's when, Doc was saying, well, he woke up from his little coma, and of course he was a little bit disorientated. But like Doc said, the dogs and him wandered back into town, and you can imagine how much that stirred up. We got an actual picture of him here in this book. I'm going to hold it up to the camera here. Why don't you hold this mic for me, and we'll see if you all can see that a little bit. There he's on the sidewalk with one of his many dogs, and here it talks about that cabin you said he built, and he never slept inside it.
It's still
the
up
best
there.
he did was sleep on the porch, maybe once or twice.
Right. That's right.
Which reminds me of a story I read in one of my good friends back there in Murray State University. He spent a good portion of 10 years writing a book on the Arkansas Confederates. And he talked about when those boys came home after 4 years of sleeping on the ground, most of the time they wintered in cabins that were real small. They packed them in there like sardines, built a fire. Of course, that's when they all got sick and died, because they didn't have good air, and if one of them got a cold, they all caught it. Because most people that fought in the Civil War, 2/3 of them that died in camp of sickness. But this boy came home to his parents, and he couldn't sleep inside. He could not get himself to sleep in a house, so he slept out in the front yard. And finally, his dad went out there and said, "Son, you gotta come in and start sleeping in the house, or it's going to kill your mother. She just can't stand the fact that you're out there." Well, he had been out for 4 years, and he got so used to it, it just didn't seem right. Of course, the only beds they ever saw was in the rare occasion that they set up a field hospital in a building. And of course, if you went in there, most of those people didn't come out, so that might have been another reason he had an aversion.
Disease and
But
stuff.
John Stink, it's quite clear, he was a traditionalist. He had been raised in the wild, and he was comfortable in the woods with his dogs, and he probably and it talks about in here they gave him an allowance. They had to have a guardian, because they didn't think he could spend his money, and the guardian gave him 50 cents a day to buy food, probably at the cafes or something, and steaks for the dogs every day. So the dogs were eating better than he was.
I guarantee it.
But he didn't care. He probably still went hunting with those dogs.
Yeah, he was traditional Osage. He lived he was the real deal. He lived the traditional lifestyle. He didn't give up his ancestry.
But it says here that in 1890, that's about the time he was born, maybe a little before that, smallpox had broke out among the Osage, and he got infected, and it led to this very rare disease that would cause him to go into those states of unconsciousness where they couldn't even hardly get a pulse out of him.
He got the nickname. You know his nickname?
Osage Zombie is one of them.
Yes, sir. That was one of them.
And now Scott tells this story, and of course later he did die, and they weren't real sure if he was dead that time. But
yes, sir. They made sure.
But they, it seemed like he might have died a second time, and they waited, and he woke up, and then the third time that they thought he died, they went ahead and embodied him, entombed him,
yes.
embalmed him. Yeah, I'm trying to find the right word there.
Embalmed him and
Treated him
treated him like
so,
he was
he was dead.
Yep.
So it took that time. So whether it was 2 or 3 times, it was still quite a legend. One and only John Stink of the Osage tribe, Osage Zombie. And there's another cute story in here about McCurdy.
Oh, McCurdy.
Elmer McCurdy.
Oh,
Yeah.
Elmer. He wasn't too right.
He wasn't too good of an outlaw, was he?
No, he wasn't good enough. He tried to join the Pepper Gang one time, and I said, one thing, McCurdy, you can't shoot.
Well, he wound up being one of the worst outlaws as far as success, but wind up being the most famous because of his death. You know that story.
Yes, sir. He got around more when he was dead than when he was alive. 'Cause after they caught him out here by Okesa. He just robbed a train. It might have been $10-some. It wasn't very much money that he got out of the deal. But the sheriffs and them deputies, they all caught up with him in a shack out here by Okesa. Well, McCurdy, he wasn't going to go down easy. So they have a shootout, and well, they kill McCurdy, and they take him to the local funeral home here, the Johnson Funeral Home here in Pawhuska, Oklahoma. It's right next door to the Ben Johnson Museum. You can't miss it. And after they embalmed and put McCurdy, nobody ever claimed McCurdy. Oh, Elmer just laid there. He laid there and laid there. Days and weeks go by. Well, the funeral director had a good idea. He thought he'd make a little money off McCurdy. Set him up. He could come to you, McCurdy, put nickels in his mouth. Well, that old funeral director, he'd collect those nickels every day. He was making money off McCurdy. Well, years go by. Old McCurdy, he's a mummy now. He's petrified, mummified mummy. Well, now he's got other plans. Well, the funeral director decides to sell him. Sells him to a freak show, like Barnum and Bailey kind of guy. Well, he goes around and he does the nickels and the pennies in the eyes, and he makes the money as you get to go see McCurdy.
Now, by this time, he was already completely wrapped up like a mummy, right? They were really advertising him as a mummy.
No, he was in his coveralls. He had his suspenders, pants, and boots on.
Okay.
He wasn't wrapped up like no mummy. This is what happened to him. Well, they sold him, they showed him around as the mummy of McCurdy. The famous crazy outlaw that just didn't make it. I mean, so he got in this trouble. Well, anyway, they show him for years. Years go by. McCurdy found a new place. They bought McCurdy, took him to Hollywood, California. And if anybody knows what the $6 Million Man was with Lee Majors, they had bought and used Elmer McCurdy as a prop, as a carnival scene in the $6 Million Man. And as they were putting him up in the fun house, the arm broke off of this dummy they thought they had. It ended up, it was a real arm. And they found out when they run it out, it was Elmer McCurdy from Pawhuska, Oklahoma. And he did all that more dead than he did alive.
I actually seen an article he's buried in the Guthrie Cemetery.
Yes, sir.
And yeah, he bought and sold during those years after he left Osage Nation. And he did finally get all wrapped up, and they were, using him like a mummy. And they thought it was fake because he'd been traveling so much as a prop. And that's why it was a big surprise. But there's a picture in the Guthrie newspaper. All the sheriff's deputies and everybody, they dressed up in the old Western attire, and they got a cedar coffin and horse-drawn hearse, and they went out and buried him in style right there in the Guthrie Cemetery. I've been to his grave. A few yards, maybe about 100 yards away from that, there's a row of graves there where they had some World War I veterans, and they were all black, part of a regiment that I think might have been recruited right there in Guthrie. And they had part of their rifle with bayonet, and not the stock, but everything above the stock, stuck in the ground on those, marking those graves of those World War I veterans. Of course, somebody had to go in there and steal them, and they were getting old and rusty, but still, I thought that was kind of neat that they buried them like they sometimes you'll watch an old movie, they'll put a bayonet on and stick that
the rifle in the ground,
and put the helmet on it and go on, and dog tags hanging off it. Talked to one of my buddies about that, and that was when the troops were moving. That's what you did, and the people who took care of bodies come up behind you, and that was the best way to spot them out in the field. You'd see a rifle with a helmet on top of it. Their dog tags hanging off of it. So they sort of did that with those. They might have been Buffalo soldiers that signed up for World War I. That'd be worth the trip down there just to see that. And another famous outlaw, and I saw his grave too. And that was one of the most famous, Bill Doolin.
Bill Doolin.
Yeah, he was captured by one of our U.S. Marshals we had here the other day, Bill Tilghman, at Eureka Springs. I've been to the actual room there at the hotel where Bill Doolin was captured by Marshal Bill Tilghman. He was in the bathtub. It's like one of those John Wayne themes. There's scenes. There's 2 or 3 movies where John Wayne is dang near captured or killed while he's in a bathtub.
In a
shower. One's a shower, and another time he's in a bathtub. But that really did happen. Then Bill Tilghman wanted to sneak up on him because Bill was an awful good shot. Awful good shot. He always had his gun nearby.
Yeah.
He had it nearby, but not close enough to reach for it when Bill Tilghman came in and took him back to Guthrie. And he was there for about 6 months. He escaped. And the last crime Bill Doolin committed was at Morrison, Oklahoma. That's my old hometown where I grew up in that area. I still have the address of Morrison and taught school there, went to school there, taught school there. He robbed a saloon of $50, and the guy didn't even recognize him. After 6 months in the Guthrie jail, he looked pretty shaggy. Everybody knew what he looked like before that because he has wanted posters everywhere. Anyway, to convince the saloon owner that he was Bill Doolin, he shot him through the ear.
No, he shot him through the ear.
But he only got $50. Come on down here. We got some folks here.
I want to.
Yeah, we're going to interrupt a little bit.
Just a little bit.
Yeah,
just a little
hold
bit.
on.
All right. So I'm just gonna speak up for just a quick second. We got some folks coming through town, and we got, I believe, a veteran. And nothing else. I want to say thank you for your service, sir.
Thank you for your service, sir. No doubt about it.
Thank you.
I appreciate you wholeheartedly.
Thank you. Absolutely. Now this man heard us coming down the street, and you guys were talking about something about these barrels and using a gun and everything, helmet, right?
Yep.
Sir, would you mind coming around over here on this side of the camera, and I'll let these guys continue talking. I would like you to show them your tattoo. Hold on. Come over here so you can see right in here.
Now we're talking.
Get a little closer.
Come on closer. Get up here.
You see my mug in there? Yeah.
Look at here. That's the kind of tattoo we got walking down the streets when we're just sitting here talking about this history. Amazing.
Yeah.
That's the brother in
And it's
arms
got
right
the
there.
boots at the bottom and the helmet on the top of that.
Yep.
And that's the modern day weapon. What is that weapon called nowadays?
It's M16.
Oh, well, I remember when the M16s
yeah.
they looked a lot.
And these are the 3 wars I participated in.
The 3 skulls are?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Say that again for.
These are represent the 3 wars that I
Which ones?
was in.
Which are?
Operation Iraqi Freedom, Operation Enduring Freedom, and Operation New Dawn.
Okay.
Sir, thank you
Wow,
very
we got a
much.
genuine hero here, folks, and we're honored and humbled to be in his
Humbled is
presence.
right. Yes, sir. We are always humbled by our military. You just got to have a little
Other
respect.
side.
A lot of people need to show it these days.
Yeah, and
Oh,
anyway.
look at that
He's got
one.
an
I like
Yeah, we got another
airborne.
one.
Yeah.
Hey, get down on here. Let them show that. It looks like, airborne.
This is the real deal.
You
Yeah.
airborne?
Yes, sir.
Real life.
Wow.
DA guys,
Okay.
so I have to watch out.
82nd Airborne.
82nd. I told a story about 82nd.
That's out of Fort Bragg, North Carolina, if I'm
Yes,
not
sir.
mistaken.
I was there
For
6
his
years.
benefit, I'm going to repeat it. One of my dearest friends, and she was a thespian. She acted on stage with me, and she at their Town and Gown Theater in Stillwater, Oklahoma. Mike Stefani, Michelle, but she went by Mike. She was in the Battle of Bulge. She was a nurse trapped behind the lines with the 82nd Airborne.
Yep, 82nd Airborne.
And I told the story about her tent getting strafed by
Yeah,
a
you
German
told me
pilot.
the story. Yeah.
Yeah,
This
she
really
slept right
happened.
through it. She just finished a 24-hour shift.
So she was
Well,
talking.
listen,
And,
this is a good story. You're gonna
And
be
then the pilot gets shot down. He's
German
wounded,
pilot.
captured. This is German pilot, yeah. Well, you wouldn't want those Americans strafing
They
America.
better not be. No.
Anyway, they take him back to the American hospital, and she treated him. And the conversation came up. Are you the one that shot my tent this morning? He said, yeah, we like to kind of help break the morale of the. They did it on purpose.
Yeah.
They figured if they kill medical personnel, it would break their morale. Well, it'd take more than that to break the morale of 82nd Airborne, isn't it right, buddy?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
All the way airborne.
All the way right there. You heard it right there, folks.
Well,
I'm serious.
it's and I actually knew another feller. They called him Sarge. His whole life, he was in the movie. Well, A Bridge Too Far.
Yep.
There's a scene where, and he knew the number. I think they actually mentioned it in the movie. 52 rowboats go across this river with machine guns. Korea after World War II, and he wasn't there long. He was setting up a perimeter and got a bullet through the mouth or something. Sent him home. That was the end of his career. But boy, he was a soldier his whole life. I met him at a factory, and he was just like barking orders like we were all his privates. And I guess I was, because I just got hired.
I believe that was right.
Yeah, Sergeant Shields was his last name. And I'll tell you one more story about the 82nd Airborne.
Oh no,
We're going back to war. How old is your parents? Are they?
About 74, 75.
Yeah, so they're still too young for the World War II generation, right?
Yeah, ours were
Okay, let's talk about your grandparents then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
my grandparents did their thing.
Well, Sergeant Shields met this nurse, and she was also another nurse, not that one I had already talked about, in the 82nd Airborne. I think this is how the story goes. And when they got out, the war was over and they went back home, they weren't from the same area. So they lost track of each other and they married other people. Well, fast forward about 30, 40 years and their spouses die. Well, they find each other and get married and stay married for the rest of their lives. And it was just a really nice war romance. They had a romance during the war, at least meeting and kind of falling in love. And then later, 50 years later, they got married and stayed together.
Well, that's quite a story, ain't that? That's
Yeah.
That's like World War II. A lot of romance come out of that old war.
Yeah, if he lived.
If he lived. Yep.
Yeah, and some movies are pretty good about showing some of that, and they're usually based on
On true stories.
On true
Where you
stories,
actually
yeah.
see a lot of it, because it's from the guys that lived it a lot of times.
I had a dear friend of mine, and he passed just a few years ago. He also would tell the story of his father, a World War II pilot, and a couple jobs that he had. One mission was extremely dangerous because they had to blow up an ammo depot, and well, they blew it up all right, but it about blew them up too because the explosions went so high up in the air, and just about got him. I guess about got him. And anyway, he does a good job portraying his father. He wore a uniform and would act. He did this for our class there at the Holy Nation College. So, but I bet you knew a lot of World War II veterans, didn't you, Doc?
Yes, sir, I did. I got a story one right here from Pawhuska that's a good story. I don't know if y'all know it or not. Do y'all know the story about Clarence L. Tinker? This World War II veteran was Clarence L. Tinker, and he was in the Pacific Theater.
Battle Midway. I know that much. Yeah.
Yes, sir. He was out in that area. Well, he got with General. He was a 2-star general, but he had to go. He was coming overseas, leaving the Pacific, to where he was in a B-25, I believe, Mitchell bomber. Well, the plane went down. It went missing in the ocean and never seen again. And that's when we lost Clarence Tinker. And we have streets named after him. And that ain't the only thing named after him. It's the Tinker Air Force Base in Oklahoma City is named after this man.
Yeah.
And my wife, I'm giving a shout out to her uncle, was the lieutenant colonel of Tinker Air Force Base for several years. So he was the second man in charge of Tinker. He told me a lot of stories. He knew about Clarence L. Tinker and the story about what he was doing in World War II and making battle plans as they were doing, and just come up disappearing and never seen again. And to this day, people can go to the museum and you can read about him. He's a famous character here in Pawhuska. But that's one of our most famous World War II veterans. We have many, many more veterans in this town that I personally know and what they've been through, and God bless them, and I give a shout out to all of them guys.
Yeah, it seemed like only yesterday that a lot of my peers and my generation were either getting drafted or they signed up for the Vietnam War, which happened, of course, in the 60s was our biggest involvement. The Vietnam War actually started in '54 for Americans. That's when we first started sending some advisors.
Yes, the French were
I think they made, the French were there after World War II. Well, if you want the whole history, the Japanese had taken French Indochina away from the French, so they tried to go in and reclaim it. Well, the Vietnamese and Ho Chi Minh had a different idea. They just wanted independence. So they fought a big battle, and the French got whooped. It was an amazing battle. I'll tell a story about that sometime. But
Yeah, I know what battle you're talking about.
But Eisenhower was requested, or they said, well, you want to kind of help us out, and we want to give it up, but if you want to come in and kind of help the anti-communist forces and fight Ho Chi Minh, and so that's where we got involved. Now, when Kennedy became president, those advisors had drawn into a few hundred to a few thousand, and now they were even talking about, well, maybe we ought to ship in a little more supplies and, a little more aid here and there. And you'll hear this a lot. JFK was trying to make a decision. Well, are we going to go all in, or should we just cut and run? Just don't look good. I don't know if it's even right. Let the Vietnamese have their country, and maybe they'll be neutral, or maybe they won't be communists or
Let
whatever.
them solve their differences.
And but at that time, we
Go.
anyway, we're back.
Don't give
But
up
right
what
before
you're
the
here.
assassination of JFK, he had, I think, he was contemplating pulling out. Of course, LBJ had a different attitude toward that war, and he went all in.
Yep,
And
that was the Texan in him.
and I graduated from high school in 1969. And the Big Tet Offensive was in '68, and that's when Walter Cronkite and a few other people come on and say, hey, there's something wrong here. They've been telling us for years that we were winning, and then all of a sudden there's this big explosion and they attack everywhere. Well, and there's still controversy about this today. Some people say it was their last-ditch effort, and then we just hang in there and it would have been done. Others said, well, if they did that once, they were still determined, after all those years and millions of casualties, to win that country back.
Situation.
Anyway, I'm not going to get into that whole controversy, but it was a time when my generation had to decide whether you're going to join or allow yourself to be drafted or wait to be drafted or go to Canada. Some people went to Canada, and some people burned their draft card and things like that. I just left it up to the Lord. I was 1A the summer of '69, and then I had plans to go to college. Some people went to college just to get out of the war. Well, I was already planning to go to college from the time I was a little boy. My mother insisted that we all, get a higher education. That's right.
Right.
So I was 1A for a while, and then 2S, which meant student deferment, and then that expired after a while. And then when Nixon got in, he said, well, it's not been too fair. They've been drafting poor people and black people disproportionately, so let's just go to the lottery and make it all fair. And of course, I was still eligible, even though I was in college, and some people got a marriage deferment, but that didn't last for 6 months. I'm not, the marriage might have lasted longer than that, but their deferment didn't. And in fact, one of my older brothers, he could have gone in early, in the early 60s, but he got married, and that marriage deferment allowed him to stay out for a while. But then, when it no longer existed, and he was eligible to be drafted, they had a larger pool of younger men. He was already in his mid-20s, or something like that. But anyway, I got everybody that went through the lottery still remembers their number. Mine was 320, and they didn't go past 185. I don't think, did they, Doc?
I don't remember that.
But anyway, I never, they said they would take old women and children and deaf and blind before they got to 320 on that. So I just served the gun another way. Yeah. But anyway, I'm going to tell a little story, and unless you got another one, Doc.
No, I was trying to think of a couple I had come to my head, and I kind of...
I was going to tell this little story about Suicide Hill. We were going to...
Yeah.
Suicide Hill
Pawnee.
is in Pawnee, and it's just north of the old hospital where I was born. And it's pretty steep. Now, it's paved now, but it's pretty steep.
Yeah, I've been up that hill.
Going up that hill. And if you're going down, you better put it in low gear and your automatic transmission or something, because it's pretty darn steep.
Yes, it is. I've drove that hill.
Yeah.
You don't want to drive it in the wintertime.
Well, this is a shorter story, but my uncle Kenneth, he had a Model T, and that's back when it wasn't paved, and he tried to go up that hill in a Model T, and there was only one way you could do that. You had to have someone chalk your wheels as you were going up. You'd spin your tires and go a little bit, and then it might die. and you'd have to have someone chalk your wheels, and you start up again. And I don't know why they just didn't drive around. I think it was the challenge of going up that hill, but somebody had to keep chalking the wheels to keep it from rolling back down.
Keep it rolling back down
Yeah,
the hill. That's
yeah.
That's determination is what that
Yeah,
is.
it was.
Get up the hill.
And then they got another one, a little suicide. And I rode my bicycles up and down these. Well, you didn't really ride them up, not when it wasn't paved. And I'll go ahead and tell that story. But I was staying with Uncle Amy when I was only probably about 12 years old. And I had me, Uncle Emil actually had bought me that bicycle. We called them 2-speeds, slow and fast.
Slow and fast, that's all they were.
They didn't have no gears or no lights or anything like that. But it had good wide tires for going into the dirt. And all bikes were dirt bikes back then because you didn't have a whole lot of payment except in town, and I was out in the country most of the time. But I brought my bike in. I was going to spend 2 weeks with Uncle Amy and Aunt Libby. Now, Aunt Libby was a nice character, a nice aunt. She'd gotten polio at a very early age, and she had braces and crutches. She walked around with braces and crutches the rest of her life, and she lived to be 85 years old. And with polio, you look in history when it went through, kind of like this pandemic. It went through and struck a lot of people. A lot of people just died, but others, they were children. They were crippled for life. Anyway, I'd stay with them, and during the day, I'd take my bike down and see if I could go up that suicide hill. Well, I'd only get about 3/4 of the way up and crash because I'd lose all my forward momentum. See, at the bottom of the hill is a T.
Yes.
You can't run. You have to be going at 90-degree angle, and then make that curve, which you couldn't be going your top speed because if you went too fast, you'd spin out when you're trying to turn. So there was no way to build up a whole lot of speed. There's only so much you could get going around a curve. So every morning, every afternoon, just broke for lunch and went after breakfast and quit before supper. Every day for 2 weeks, I tried to go up that hill, and I'd crash. I'd look over there on the fence, and I said, well, this is where I normally crash, right here.
That's your spot.
And I would be pumping those tires, and the bike would be standing still. And it would only move about 3 inches in the last few strokes down. And then finally I'd lose my balance right there at the same spot. And I knew that if I could just get just a little more momentum and get past that, the hill actually starts to level out. Not really level, but not as steep. And if I just get past that crash point, I could make it. Well, one day, I come around the corner exceedingly fast and did not crash. Went up that hill. I said, I'm already past the spot where I normally crash, and I'm still pumping good. And the hill is starting to level out a little bit. It's going to get easier instead of harder now. I'm going to make it up the top of Suicide Hill. First kid in the history of Pawnee to go up that in a bicycle before it was paved. When a car came over the hill.
Oh, no.
Now, this was a 1-lane street, gravel road. I had to be on the packed gravel path. There's 2 paths. I had to be on that because if you pulled over and do the loose gravel, you're going to be down right that quick. So here comes this car coming down the hill. Now, for a second, I thought, well, maybe it'll pull over into the ditch. And it actually did pull over. It did pull over, and it was going to let me go. But during that 2 weeks, and the 2 months and 2 years before that, one thing that my Czech relatives ensured and tried to teach this young man, something that we don't hear much today. It was just one word, and that was others. others come before you do. You know, it wasn't the time when children were to be seen and not heard.
I know that feeling.
Adults got first of everything. Children got what was left over.
That's right.
And they reversed that sometime in the 60s. I missed out on that. But anyway, so I was thinking about letting that car drive in the ditch so I could win a little bicycle challenge up that hill. But something got me. Something got me. It was that one word. Others. Others. So, even though it had already started toward the ditch, I pulled over to my side of the ditch, my ditch. I didn't last 2 feet. I went down. Well, that was dang near the last day there. And to this day, I don't feel bad about it at all. I still feel I conquered Suicide Hill. I conquered it in another way by sticking to the principle, others. Now, fast forward about 35 years after that, another thing happened. I was in Orlando, Florida, Disney World. And it was a super hot day, very humid. My wife and I decided we'd sit on this little ledge, concrete ledge. It was wide enough to sit on, pretty easy actually. And here come this little kid walking that ledge. He come right up to us, and he says, "Excuse me." Now, we had just sat down there. We were hot. We were sweating. We were tired. And I didn't say anything, but reluctantly, my wife and I, we both got up so he could walk behind us and stay on that little... The ledge wasn't like walking a pipe or anything. It was 2 feet wide. But anyway, I never forgot that because I just remember thinking, he didn't get the others lesson at home like I did. Anyway, that's what I wanted to end with, that story about others. So, in these days, think of others first occasionally, or all the time.
A little bit more often than usual, yes. Especially now, this is a great time to think about others. Guys, we appreciate all your time here, and we got folks here from, I tell you what, we got some Hot Springs, Arkansas, is that right? We got a veteran.
I've been there.
He's actually just
Fort
getting
Smith.
back here in the last 3 months, is it? And he's just getting back from Afghanistan. Thank you again for your service, sir. Folks, just again, look after each other, and let's just keep it real and keep on doing our little things and do what we can, when we can, with who we can to help as many as we possibly can. All right, folks, this is Scott Trotter, Rooster, and Ned Pepper here, Doc and Clarence. Guys, thank you very much. I'm going to sign us off there.
Come back.
Monty's face is in the way. Move his face out of the way.